All right, we are continuing our sermon series called "Say What?" Like this is like, and this one is "Fear God" is what we're dealing today. We have one more series in this one. One more that's next week, and it's all about being perfect. Jesus tells you to be perfect, so that one will be fun. And then we start a new series. We do that Missio Day, kind of the mission of God. And I want to take this time to announce what we're doing there in that one. So in 2 weeks, the 23rd, right? The 23rd, we are going, that one is going to center around Christmas. Because it's the 23rd of June. It's exactly almost 6 months from Christmas. So we're going to be singing Christmas music. Sermon is going to be on Christmas stuff. All this fun Christmas stuff. So I'm not telling you what to wear, but if you want extra stars, like you get extra stars if you actually wear the Christmas sweater when it's 900 degrees outside, and all those things. I expect Christmas shorts, Don. Two weeks. So that'll be a fun Sunday. The sermon will be on Christmas stuff and all those things. We did it kind of last year, and so we're bending full into it. It'll just be a fun time. But so that's what we're going on. But this sermon here, we're looking at all of these like weird phrases of Jesus, like that Jesus oftentimes says stuff which is just like what's going on here. So we have to remember as we look at all of these, and I think I was never really taught to read this way until I got like into seminary. Which I don't know what that says about like my upbringing and all, but reading this like adults, reading this, remembering what comes before it and what comes after it, looking at the context, because this verse, it's so easy to go down rabbit trails on this one and talk about things that aren't really what this is about. So before we get into it, how many people have our verse this week, Luke 12:5, as like a Bible cover or a bookmark or something like that, right? Because it says, "I will show you whom you should fear. Fear him who, after your body has been killed, has authority to throw you into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him." Is that like, yay, right? This is the gospel of the Lord. That's like, yeah, we're like, well, easy, Jesus, easy. What are you talking about here? Aren't you supposed to be about puppies and bunnies and happy things? Like all of these things, kingdom of heaven, grace, mercy, all these things, and yet you're talking about being sent to hell and all that stuff. Are you telling me if I don't shape up, you're going to throw me to the bad place? Let's get into it, because this is kind of a fascinating verse here. So what are you telling us, Jesus? So I think this verse actually sounds like something I heard a lot when I was a child. It was this, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Isn't that what this verse kind of sounds like? What in the world was that phrase even mean? I think that phrase is just proof that our parents, and some of you are parents, right, just live in exasperation about what your child is doing, right? And so you just say stuff, right? Like you go over here. So what's going on inside this verse? What's happening? Is it telling us to be afraid of God? By the way, I used fear God as the title here because be afraid of God didn't look right on it. So I'm like, I am design driven by all of these things, right? So fear God is what it is. So what's going on? So I think in order to see what's happening here, you got to look at the context. So that was Luke chapter 12, verse 5. So if we back up and go to verse 1, it says this. And we read it earlier, and you can read the whole thing in the bulletin if you want to. So meanwhile, when a crowd of many thousands had gathered, so that they were trampling one another. What kind of crowd is that? Why have people gathered together so much so that they're like pressing in on each other and kind of trampling? We're going to get into that here in a second. And Jesus began to teach them, and mainly his disciples first. He said, "Be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy." Ooh, what's the yeast of the Pharisees? What is that, right? I think like the thing that we all kind of know is that the Pharisees really wanted everyone just to be perfect and live like close to God, right? Like to live this way. They're like this religious official they're really stressing on this, but it goes so much deeper than that. Let's go through the cast of characters of like the religious officials back then. So you had the Pharisees, right? This Pharisees, they like to walk around in public places with their robes and all these things, like looking pretty great, right? Yeah, exactly. And then they had this group of guys called the Sadducees. They're very similar, but they didn't believe in the resurrection. And then you had two other cast of characters that we really don't think much of, but reveal to you what's actually going on. You had the scribes and the religious lawyers. Why in the world are we getting involved with religious lawyers? This is something that reveals to you what the goal of the Pharisees were. Because the Pharisees believed, they saw, they had all these fears around them. They had fears that they were like, man, we are in this oppressive captivity again. Rome is our overseers, right? They're over there. We want to kick Rome out. And before that, it was Greek. The Greeks, they were their captors. And before that, it was Babylon and Assyria and all these things that they viewed all this stuff. And the Pharisees in Jesus' day, they believed that if they could just get everyone to act right for just a little bit, then the Messiah would come and God would save his people. Or, if we rub a little bit of new on it, if people would just act correctly, if people would finally just come to their senses, then God would finally heal and bless this land. Yeah, you heard that one. Right? Like that's what they do. And you know how they would do that? It wasn't just stressing this, like they wouldn't go up to Don here and like, Don, you really should live better. More pants, man. More pants. Less shorts. Like all those things. That's not what they would do. They would do that. They would stress this holy living, but they also would use these religious lawyers to create systems inside of the life of the people there that would force them to comply. You will obey, or you will have consequences that could end you up in prison or kill you, right? Like this is what the Pharisees were doing. When Jesus is talking about my yoke is easy and my burden is light, that's what he's talking about. And you can imagine how people would get jazzed up for this because they would see the Romans and they're like, oh no, they're like, it's going away, like, all that stuff. We need to live better and all that stuff. They would get jazzed up because of fear and all that stuff, and they would follow after these Pharisees, but the Pharisees are just bringing these yoke of oppression onto people. Beware the yeast of the Pharisees. You see it? Does anyone know? Let's see the true Bible scholars for today. By the way, before this week, I would not have known the answer to this question. True Bible scholar is not how I would describe myself. Does anyone know what is going on right before this verse? Like the end of chapter 11. Does anyone know? That's when Jesus is going, woe to you, Pharisee. It's all these Pharisaical woes. Woe to you for doing all these people. Like, and he talks so much about you devour widows' homes. You destroy all these people, right? Like this is what he's talking about here. Beware the yeast of the Pharisees. He's putting stress on people that they would live perfectly. But Jesus doesn't seem to like that. So we skip down to verse 4 for a second. He goes, I tell you, my friends, don't be afraid. And you can tell what he's talking about, right? Don't be afraid of those that can kill the body and after that can do no more. And we start seeing what he's talking about with this fear. Because there's so many things that we fear, Back in their time, they're fearing the Romans. The Romans could kill them, but so could these other people. They could take their livelihoods away from them. They could fear these religious leaders, but there's so many things that we fear too, right? Health outcomes, how our kids are doing. We fear, like, again, I stress, like I did earlier, I fear about what my boomer parents are up to. Good grief. You guys got to get it together. Like that's what, like, these are real fears. And Jesus is saying, don't be afraid of those. It reminds me of a phrase that I say a lot. And I love this phrase because on the surface, it's the most dumb thing you've ever heard. And that's why I love it. But it's this phrase. If they can't take it from you, then they can't take it from you. Some of you have heard me say that before. Some of you are nodding like that's some wisdom-filled phrase. Like, if they can't take it from you, they can't take it from you. And what I mean by that is so often in fear, we grab and hold on to things so tight. And then when someone takes them from us, like, it feels like it's a loss, right? It feels like we're losing something. But if you hold everything with kind of this open grip, if you're not holding it on to it, are they really taking it from you? Like all those things, like that's, if they can't take it from you, they can't take it. And he's like, don't be afraid. Like, all they can do is kill you. like that's like, which is like, we're like, okay, but it's like this other mind thing going on, because we have a lot of fears. We have a lot of fears, and it can reveal what our idolatry is. And he says, and Jesus says, if you want to fear something, if you really want to fear something, you should fear him who, after your body has been killed, has authority to throw you into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him. Right? Like, that's over there. So let's talk about hell for a second, because that's not a third rail to stand on. Let's talk about hell for a second. When we talk about hell, I think the American church has made a pretty serious error going on with all of this stuff. We have placed hell right in the middle of the story about church and our salvation, right? You can see it by the classic means of evangelism, right? If you died tonight, do you know where you would go? Please understand, at least it's my opinion, that is not a Christian phrase. It's an American Christian phrase, but it's over there. Do you know what's the center of the story of salvation? The cross of Jesus and his resurrection. That is the center. That is where the Genesis and everything, the beginning and the end is in the middle with that. It's not about hell. Hell makes us the center of that story. We are not the center, right? Like that is going on. So if that's the thing here, so hell, what's the actual word here? It's actually Gehenna. Now, Gehenna is this like trash dump, but it's also this place that has this really rich history. They would do human sacrifices there. It was this gross place that they made into the trash dump that had been for centuries used to throw people away because of it. So I think we can say here, fear him who has authority that can throw you away. Is everyone feeling like in a cheery mood? To make you feel better, we're going to talk about my good old pal Job now. Like, I love the story of Job. I talk about Job all the time, don't I, Ed? I love the story of Job. Job is great. And the story that I learned growing up about Job is that here's this guy who is incredibly righteous, and then God, because of evil inflicted suffering onto Job, and Job is this righteous man just constantly calling out to God. I don't know what happened, but he's got these three nasty friends who are constantly telling him, like, Job, you're a terrible person, which is what you want to hear when you're suffering, right? It's like when my best friend, it's like, you're terrible, right? Like all those things. I don't think that's the proper reading of Job anymore. I've done a sermon series on Job. We did Bible study on Job 3 years ago. Was that about when it was? Like that's, yeah, and it was good. You can look at it. It was great Bible study. Here's what I think happened with Job then. Job was afraid at the beginning of the book. He was so afraid of losing everything he had. Do you know what he would do? He would make sacrifices to hedge. He would make sacrifices before anyone did anything wrong, just in case one of his kids has done something wrong. I know some of you pray for your kids in that same way, right? Just in case they do something wrong, Lord. Like be with them, right? Like that's he was hedging, and everything was taken from him. I don't think Job is righteous. I think, and what I think I hear in Job for the first 35 chapters of that book, you have Job who is suffering, and the things that Job says sound weirdly familiar to the things I say when I'm suffering. It's like, I didn't do anything wrong. Why do I have the splinter in my toe? Maybe I don't suffer the same way Job does. But then all of his friends are like the garbage things that I say to my friends when they're suffering. It's like, I'm really sorry that you're going through all this, but you probably did it to yourself. You're 40 years old now. You have no business on a kickball field. Like why your knee is now in another room than you are existing in. That's this is what he's saying here. And you don't start seeing a semblance of true wisdom till finally God comes onto the scene in Job. And what God does is he first takes Job on this huge tour of the creation. And he says things like, Job, do you know, you're talking about all this wisdom that you haven't done anything wrong. Do you know when the mountain goat gives birth? Do you watch when the doe bears its own fawn? Do you give the horse its strength or clothe its neck in that flowing mane? Job, did you make it leap like a locust, striking terror with the snorts of its mouth? Right? Its proud snorting. Do you do all that? Does the hawk take flight by your wisdom, Job? Does it spread its wings towards the south? And I love this one for a deeper meaning. Does the eagle soar at your command and build its nest on high? Eagle is not a word in the Old Testament. Do you guys remember what the Old Testament word for eagle is? Buzzards. Buzzards, which I love because in Rome and the U.S., we love eagles. So we translate it usually as eagle, but it's and he lift you up on buzzards' wings. Like that, and we hate buzzards, but that's some people are like, oh, I don't like that. That's the word. That's the word there. But do the buzzards soar at your command and build its nest on high? Right? He's taking them all around. It's like, Job, are you really that with it on all of this stuff? Do you know what's going on? Then, after a couple of chapters, he takes Job to the depths of the sea, basically. And what you got to understand about this is that the sea is the place of all danger. And I think we still understand this. We've even had tragedies around the sea, and we still do. We were talking about it on Thursday. The whole Bermuda Triangle thing. That one plane, that Malaysian air flight that lost in the sea. We just had that private submarine that disappeared in the sea, right? The sea is still this scary place. And Leviathan is the sea beast. It's the thing that dominates, the most scary thing that you can think of. So Leviathan is the scariest thing that Job can think of. And when you look at it here, you look at what God says. It's Job, can you pull Leviathan? Can you pull Leviathan in with just a fishing pole? Can you tie down its tongue? And then I love this. I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to translate it for you. You ready? Can you make a pet of it like a bird or put it on a leash for your young women in your house? Young women. Come on, these English translators need to do better. Young women. Let's translate to what that's actually saying. Can you can you make a pet out of Leviathan and give it as a pet for your girls? The scariest thing that Job can think of, God says, can you make it a pet for your girls? Because I do. Because I do. Right? The scariest thing, can you make it a pet? And God says, that's what I do. And then we go back to our verse, and it says, if you're going to fear something, fear him who after your body has been killed can throw you into hell. So if you're going to fear, don't be scared of Leviathan. Don't be scared of the health outcomes. Don't be scared about all these things over here. Don't be scared of the nation. Don't be scared of all this stuff. Like if you're going to be scared of something, be afraid of God who can throw you into hell. But Jesus keeps talking because he says, aren't not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies? Aren't these birds worthless? Yet they're never, not even one of them is forgotten by God. Indeed, the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Listen, some of us have a lot of hair. Other of us, not so much. It's okay. That's me acting out in pride against you. But God knows the numbers, the hair on your head, and he says, don't be afraid. You are worth more than so many of those sparrows. Here, let's zoom in. You guys ready for this? Oh, don't be afraid. Aren't you worth so much more than those sparrows? Aren't you worth more than those sparrows? Our fear can overtake us, right? Our fear of what's going to happen to us. Our fears of what happens around it, and it reveals our idolatry. But if we remember our old pal Luther, how he always goes back to the catechism, and he reminds us of what we should fear, that we should fear, love, and trust about God above all things. Because all those other things that we fear, our national leaders, all these other things that we fear, our health outcomes, our family and what's going to happen to them, all that stuff will all leave us. But God, he came into the world as one of us, as Jesus, and God went to hell for you. And some of you just clutched your pearls. You're like, what? You just said it in the Apostles' Creed, right? God came as Jesus, and he died with all of our fears and insecurities on himself. All those fears of not knowing what was going on, all those fears of pain and hurt, he went to the cross with all of those, all heaped onto him. And he died. And he went to the trash dump. He went to hell for you. And he rises from it like a daisy after a forest fire, showing that there's life, has overcome any destruction that we could ever face. He died and rose again so that you can fear, love, and trust in God above all things. So there's going to be so many things that we're afraid of. And we're going to act out in all those things. But know that God took all those fears and insecurities and he took them to the dump and threw them away and rose again to bring you life. And I think that's good news. And we'll end right there. I invite you to stand for a blessing. May God continue to bless and keep all of you. That you would know that no matter what fears may come into your life, no matter how you worry about your kids or your grandkids or your parents, your health outcomes, your neighbors, your country, all those things, that God is bigger and has seen you through in all of those. Know that he values you more than even those tiny sparrows. And he remembers each and every one of those. Be blessed. Amen. We'll sing.